Hi, my name is Revelle. I'm a native author. I wrote the Algonquin Quest series of books. This is my third novel, Algonquin Sunset. And this takes place on a river, Salmon River. While I prepared our meal, I watched as the others in the group laughed, told stories, and collected wood roots from the forest. The four young boys were kept busy running back and forth from the wooded area with armloads of dry firewood. Since wood was needed for the individual fires, people helped themselves from the communal pile the youngsters made. Ours was a culture of sharing. No one went hungry, cold, or in need of aid for anything. The community at large was there for all of us and to help everyone survive in times of need. During the meal, warriors went from one cooking fire to another to sample what their friends were eating. The two women by far had a larger gathering around their fire than the ones where a warrior was a cook. In my search for wood, I found a forked tree branch the length of my arm and the size of my wrist around, and this I put aside. Now taking 3 pieces of green sapling, I notched the ends on 2 of them and forced them into the ground on each side of the fire. Then I placed the 3rd piece lengthwise into the notches. Picking up some good chunks of caribou meat, I hung them from the spit to cook. The dripping fat juices from the meat on the spit caused the fire to sizzle and the flames to jump higher. The mingled aroma of wood smoke and cooking meat was overpowering as it flooded my sense of smell and clung to my hair and my clothes. Glancing away from the flames, I realized that a very attentive crowd of 5 drooling dogs had been attracted to the scent wafting from the fire. I stood and whistled loudly, bringing my brother and our 2 canoe companions to the fire, along with a couple of cousins. No worry, there's lots of tea, mush soup, and meat for all. The dogs would have to settle for the putrid fish heads tossed to them by the young boy who had been given the task of cleaning the day's catch. Everyone now cut off a piece of bark from an oak or elm tree to hold their hot meat that they had sliced from the spit. Each warrior also dipped his drinking vessel into the tea container and gulped down the hot liquid. With meat juice spilling out of the corners of his mouth, my brother grinned and said, "Shashagi, you cook as good as any woman." They quickly finished the tea, and I again filled the container, adding more heated stones. This time I used the foliage of a cedar tree to flavor the water. While they waited for the tea to boil, they dipped their drinking vessels in the heated mush and scooped it out of the cup with their fingers. After finishing their mush, some wiped their hands on the grass, on their pants, or on the nearest dog within reach. Then they finished the new batch of tea. Very few words were spoken. Eating was a serious undertaking, completed with a few rounds of belching, farting, and a sudden rush to the nearest tree. I left the fire to find my tree, and upon returning, doused the flames with water. We didn't need a forest fire following us down this small river. Once all the fires were completely put out, dogs and people were quick to step into the respective canoes and continue the journey. The river we were on was a connecting stream to a system of lakes that would take us to our village another day or 2 away. There would be one small portage on this river, but it was steep going up and then coming down the other side. The river at this time of the year of the berry moon was deep enough to paddle in most spots, but there were 2 areas where we would have to get out, the portage being the second. The first place we would have to get out was a stretch of white water that wasn't deep enough to shoot through. We would have to walk in the water and guide our jimong canoe through the rocks. Paddling under the hot afternoon sun, I faintly heard the sound of water rushing over the rocks, telling us we were close to where we would have to get into the river and pull the boats. As the other 3 paddled, I steered the canoe towards the shore where all of us could easily exit and wade the river past this rocky hindrance. Mishku swiftly stood on his haunches as we neared the shore, emitting a low, throaty growl and perking his ears. There was probably some sort of wild animal nearby that he had caught the scent of and was trying to identify. And this part of the waterway ran through a thick forest that not even the sun's strong rays could penetrate. The warriors who had left the canoes for the shore to scout ahead and to guard the rest of us from any trouble were soon swallowed up by the darkness they ventured into. Forgetting the dog's agitation, I stepped in the water to guide the boat through the shallow rapids. The river rocks were slippery, and I watched as a few men lost their footings and fell into the bubbling froth. The two women and the youngest boy stayed in their respective canoes. Most of the dogs leaped into the river to follow their human companions. Mishko stayed in the canoe, still growling. As I skirted the shoreline, the flies left the cover of the woods and feasted on my bare skin. Skirting fish swam between my legs, with the odd one nibbling at my toes. Warriors were strung out along the shores of the river. They waded to the spot in the stream where the water deepened enough to get back into the canoes. Here they all grouped together and waited for the boats as they came down signal file. The forest seemed too quiet to me. All the birds and insects had stopped their racket. Then the shrill scream of a solitaire Tishindi's blue jay alerted the forest, setting off all the other birds and creating a deafening chorus. One of our warriors who had been scouting ahead slid down the embankment into the stream, reddening the water around him and the gathering canoes. At that same moment, as another boat reached a closely knit cluster in the rapids, I took my eye off where I was walking to watch the body slide in the water among the canoes. In that instant, I slept. Mishko let out a fierce bark, and I fell into the river. Grasping the boat and simultaneously hearing what I thought were several sounds, then there was an intense burning in the center of my left hand. An arrow had pinned it to the canoe hull. I couldn't feel any pain, but neither could I remove my hand. Mishko was now barking continually because of the screams of the women and the dead and dying warriors. I gazed up at the opposite shore and caught sight of a Nato, a Sioux warrior with two black lines painted across his face and a red streak on his forehead. I knew this man. He was a sworn enemy of the Anishinaabe and as ruthless as they came. Otehihaka Many Elk was his Natawi Sioux name, a warrior who wore many eagle feathers because of the Anishinaabe scouts he had taken. The Natawi Sioux were wading into the river, swinging their war axes and meeting our warriors who had survived the initial onslaught of arrows in a brutal hand-to-hand struggle. Mishko, stop your noise, I cried. Lay down. The dog, startled by my raised voice, immediately obeyed and lay down the boat with a thump. Turning my eyes to the opposite bank, I spotted where I could get to a landing or remove the arrow and return to help my people. As I approached the shore, a large rabbit was sitting there on his haunches and seemed to wave at me to come to him. I was starting to feel the effect of the arrow now, and I was racked with chills. Blood coursed down the side of the canoe, coloring both it and the water red. When I clambered onto the shore, I looked up in the eyes of a tall warrior. He reached down and grabbed me, pulling the canoe and myself to shore. Then he broke the arrow, releasing my hand. I gazed up again and asked, "Who are you?" "Nanabujo." Then I blacked out.